It was sometime in 1991. I just started my degree at college, and it wouldn't be long before I started hanging out and becoming friends with other nerds in the computer labs. Many of us owned Amigas. PCs at the time were still unaffordable to most students, unless you had rich parents. Of course, it wouldn't be long before we started copying discs. Much of my education to the Amiga was thanks to groups like Razor 1911, Fairlight, Cortex, and Prestige. But one particular day, I came home with a stack of discs in my hand. One of them was Lemmings, a brand new puzzle game that I'd heard about from Psygnosis that I was eager to check out. When I booted up the disc, I didn't get the classic Psygnosis owl logo splash screen, instead I got this. The message said, "Something wonderful has happened. Your Amiga is alive. And even better, some of your discs are infected by a virus." At the time, I didn't know what this was, and worse, my game didn't boot at all. Each time I tried, nothing would happen. The disc wouldn't boot. So obviously the thing to do was to try another disc, and that didn't boot either. Eventually, I went through my entire set of discs, and that message would finally reappear. I realized that maybe some resident program was hanging around in memory, so I powered everything down and turned the Amiga back on, put the Lemmings disc back in, and again, nothing happened. The next day at school, my friends let me know that they had the same message on their Amiga as well. And even worse, any disc that I inserted into my Amiga that wasn't write protected would become infected too. This was mine, and probably many others that are watching this, their very first experience with having a virus on their home computer. This is the SCA Virus, one of the very first computer viruses to exist. It released in 1987. SCA is short for Swiss Cracking Association, a cracking group that was well known in the C64 and Amiga scenes, and would infamously write one of the very first home computer viruses in history. It became so widespread that it even made its way to some commercial games, and it was said that thanks to rampant software piracy, 40% of Amigas sold worldwide would get infected. A computer virus is a type of malware that replicates itself by modifying other computer programs and inserting its own code into those programs. If this replication succeeds, then the affected program is said to be infected, and a computer virus is a metaphor derived from biological viruses. Now these days, when someone says computer virus, it's more in reference to malware or ransomware that can devastate entire computer networks that are all connected online. But while the earliest computer viruses weren't so sophisticated, they still caused many problems and much confusion. The first known virus to make its way to home computers was known as Brain, which released in 1986, 1 year before SCA, and it was developed by two brothers who ran a computer software store in Pakistan called Brain Computer Services. They were selling cut-priced versions of IBM PC software such as Lotus 123 and WordStar for as little as a few bucks a piece. In effect, they were pirating software and distributing illegal software themselves. One of the brothers had written custom heart tracking software for the PC that Brain Computer Services sold to their customers. Like with most software at the time, it came on floppy disk, and in order to track legitimate copies of the software, it had a custom boot sector. According to the brothers, for every copy that was made, this custom boot sector would install itself onto any disk that wasn't write protected, with a copy of the actual boot sector of that target disk moved to another part of the disk, and then the sectors were marked as bad. Infected disks usually have 5 kilobytes of bad sectors. The disk label was also changed to Brain, and the following text can be seen across the infected boot sectors. The Brain virus was the first example of a stealth virus that could just hang around infecting disks by replacing boot sectors, rendering the disks unusable. The virus, however, came with text information on the boot sector about the virus. Contact us for vaccination. In 1987, the brothers were shocked to have received a large number of phone calls from people in the UK, US, and elsewhere demanding that they disinfect their disks. They explained to their customers that their motivations had not been malicious, but the damage was already done. SCA, or the Swiss Cracking Group, got their start in 1986, releasing cracks for the Commodore 64, but like many scene groups in Europe, quickly moved to the Amiga when it became more affordable. In 1987, they would release a Miami Vice demo, which came on 4 discs. that had the entire intro music for the TV show sampled in its entirety. In order for the demo to play uninterrupted, you would need 2 disk drives and swap disks in and out so new music data could be streamed in before it was required. This was quite technologically advanced for the time and showed off some of the unique, interesting features of the Amiga, including DMA or direct memory access that could access sectors on the disk and load data in without stalling the CPU. As well as this, it showed off the power of the Paula chip. SCA was a core group of 2 brothers. Christian Weber, who would go by the scene name Saturnus the Invincible, was the main programmer and took upon the challenge to write a virus when the question was asked whether it was indeed possible to infect an Amiga. For the virus to work on the Amiga, it would need to be written to the boot sector, or the boot block as it's known on Amiga disks. The boot block is the first 2 sectors read by the Amiga when a disk is first inserted. In order for the virus to stay in stealth mode, the boot block still needs to be able to boot into any Amiga formatted disk. It also must stay resident in memory, so any warm boot or press of Control Amiga to reset the machine would not flush the virus from memory. With each reboot, the virus will use a do.io vector to infect other disks. Although the virus itself was considered to be non-destructive, in other words, even if you did get the message, "Something wonderful has happened, your Amiga is alive," if you had a formatted Amiga disk, the disk would still boot normally, and no damage would be done. The problem is, many Amiga games use custom boot blocks with custom disk I/O routines. This was done to mitigate software piracy. If the boot block is overwritten on a game with a non-standard boot block, then the game won't boot at all. If the disk has the write protection notch enabled, then there is no harm done. Unfortunately, however, if the write protection notch is disabled, then your disk becomes a paperweight. According to Christian, the goal wasn't to disrupt or cause any malicious damage. Rather, like most demo coders and crackers, the challenge had been thrown down to see if it was possible. People said viruses similar to those on the VAX and IBM computers couldn't exist, and I set out to prove them wrong. But I never wanted to destroy any software with it. With just the boot block to work with, Christian coded his SCA virus in 2 days and gave an infected disk to his brother with the software. The Amiga scene is famous for its copy parties, where many would turn up to an organized event, usually a weekend of partying, watching the latest demos, playing games, and of course, copying discs. And it's famous for its public domain, where free and shareware software was distributed. With this in mind, it wouldn't be long before the SCA virus installed itself onto many Amigas in Europe. But Europe was just the beginning. Because of piracy groups and bulletin boards to spread games around, infected SCA disks made their way around the world. A Commodore technician, Bill Costa, on the comp.sys.amiga Usenet forum outlined the virus, its dangers, how it works, and how to protect yourself from it. He provided a small program written in Amiga Basic to identify and remove the infection. This started a cat and mouse game with SCA, where they would simply update the virus by a few bytes to bypass detection. And as a result, there are a few different variants of the SCA virus in the wild. SCA would realize the damage it was causing, and they would soon release an SCA virus killer disk that would detect the virus in memory and on any Amiga disk boot block and remove it. The problem, as we mentioned earlier, while this worked fine for regular Amiga OS formatted disks, any non-standard disk, which comprised of about 95% of Amiga games, could not be salvaged. To make matters worse, during the life of the Amiga, the file format system had also changed from what is known as OFS, or the original file system, to FFS, or fast file system. No, it doesn't stand for the other thing. Because the virus is checksum based against the OFS, any standard disk with the FFS installed would also lose its ability to boot. The SCA Virus Protector disk, released by SCA, also had some information. It was programmed in July 1987 by SCA in Switzerland, and in 3 months it went around the globe. It was intended to be a really harmless one. but some newer software can be damaged by it. We are very sorry. It was never our intention to destroy any software with this virus. In 1988, the SCA virus became so widespread that it began to infect legitimate discs that had nothing to do with games, piracy, or copying, and it famously made its way to mainstream newspapers and magazines. The virus has reached Perth, Australia, infecting hundreds of Amiga computers in businesses and in homes. Perhaps a little over the top, but the public really didn't understand viruses and how much damage they could do. Compute magazine in 1988 confirmed that the SCA virus had found its way to the World of Commodore show in Toronto, Canada of the same year, infecting the boot blocks of many a disc. The panic caused Jim Butterfield to write a 2-page article about the virus and how to administer what he called the antidote. Commodore User Magazine editor Mike Patenden sent a typed letter to SCA. Dear SCA, we here at CU are very interested in talking about the virus with you. Please write and tell us what you do, why you invented the virus, whether you expect it to go this far, and what you think of being called vandals. If you don't mind a phone call, which we'll return to save cost, would be better. Naturally, anything we say carries no names and there would be no repercussions. This is for our use only. Thank you for your help in advance. SCA was the first, and quickly other coders would write their own viruses. Some of them were particularly nasty, and have the ability to not only corrupt disks, but they would also latch onto hard drives and infect files, which was starting to become affordable by the early 90s. While not specifically related to SCA, Commodore User Magazine themselves would get into hot water when they would release their magazine with a cover disk that contained a virus known as RevBoot, short for Revenge Bootloader. Judging by a few calls we've had this month, it seems, along with the virus killer we gave you in the August issue, on a batch of disks, we also included a genuine virus. It outlined that no one was safe from viruses on the Amiga, and it exposed many in the media and in games that they too were copying disks illegally. There were 2 known commercial games released that contained the SCA virus on their boot block. The first was Jinxter, the graphic adventure game from Magnetic Scrolls. The NTSC 1.0 version that was distributed by Telecomsoft in North America is known to contain the virus. It was quickly removed and updated to the 1.2 version, but copies of the game are still said to exist. The other was Advanced Fruit Machine Simulator by Codemasters. If you have the version with the title screen, then your copy is likely infected with SCA. The message, "Something wonderful has happened, your Amiga is alive," is a line taken from the movie Short Circuit, with the catchphrase of that movie, "Something wonderful has happened. Number 5 is alive."
Number 5 is alive.
You might be wondering, what happened to SCA after the virus release? Were they run out of the scene? Did any of the members get arrested and charged? Not at all. SCA is considered one of the most respected groups in the Amiga scene at the time, and their status of releasing the first ever virus on the Amiga has elevated them to legends. So many fan letters from around the world were sent to SCA showing their respect and admiration for the group. Many viruses came after SCA, some of them quite sophisticated, and for each new boot block virus that was created, antivirus software was released to combat it. These days, Amiga viruses are nothing more than a novelty or a passing curiosity. But if you're in the business of archiving old disks, there's always that threat. Make sure those disks are right protected. And what of the selfish jerks who created the virus? Paul Ellis, who ran a retail shop in the UK at the time, said, "I don't think you could print what I would do if I got a hold of them." Mark Lewis, who then worked at EA, had a different take. These guys are basically criminals, operating on the edge of the industry. But I also think that the virus creators are the most creative people, and I just wish they'd ring me up so I could get them using their talents in a positive rather than negative ways, writing games rather than destroying them. Christian, aka Saturnus, would do exactly that. He would transition from cracker to game developer, where he would work on a few commercial Amiga releases. Not a huge surprise, many skilled Amiga programmers got their start either in the demo or ware scene and ended up working in game studios. As for the SCA virus, it's one of those important moments in the history of the Amiga that defined the hardware and its community. The SCA virus was talked about everywhere, and it was just 512 bytes of code. As for the group, They're still around to this day, and still release the occasional demo here and there. Whether you were directly affected by the SCA virus back in the day, or if you weren't, SCA, or the Swiss Cracking Association, goes down as one of the most legendary cracking groups in the history of the Amiga.